I'll try. There you go.
That one worked. Good evening and welcome to the Morrison County Board of Adjustment public hearing for March 18, 2025. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I have a few items to cover before we get started. Please sign in at the door if you have not already done so. There you will find a detailed handout of the step-by-step procedure we will follow tonight if you wish to take one. Please put any electronic devices on silent mode at this time. Also, please note that all testimony is being recorded for the record. Members of the Board of Adjustment are appointed by the County Board of Commissioners with one member from each of the 5 commissioner districts. Land Services staff is here to assist the Board of Adjustment with its duties. The task of the Board of Adjustment is to consider requests for variances and appeals from an order, requirement, or decision made by a county zoning official in accordance with the state law and county ordinance. Each request is considered on its own merit. The burden of proving a practical difficulty rests with the applicant. If a variance is granted, it is granted to the land, not to the landowner. There's a protocol for how we will proceed tonight. For each variance request on the agenda, we will hear a staff report, testimony from the applicants, and then the board will discuss and gather more information as needed. Next, I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience wishing to speak to this request. I will ask each party to come up to that podium, state their name and address for the record, and give their testimony. Please be as factual as possible and direct all statements and questions to me. After all testimony is complete, I will close the public hearing portion of the process. The board will then review and discuss the case in terms of our finding of fact criteria as required by Minnesota statute and county ordinance. We will have a series of votes, discuss whether conditions be made, and have a final motion to approve or deny the request based on those findings. After this final vote on your request, you may leave if you wish. We have 2 agenda items tonight, and the first agenda item is Paul and Linda Tatro, Cullen and Amanda Carter. No address, application for a variance to allow a type 3 septic on a newly created parcel. Please come up to the chairs here and have a seat.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
And I just wanted to note that that is a change in the agenda as you see it on the screen. So if it's okay with the board, I would like to handle the Carter request first. Is that okay with the members of the board?
Any objections?
No, that's fine.
Okay,
Good to
then
go.
let
I
me
have no
get to
problem
that
either.
slide.
Please state your name for the record.
Colin Carter.
Amanda Carter.
Thank you. And Miss Amy, when you're ready with the staff report.
Yes, Mr. Chair. This is a variance request again to allow the creation and development of a parcel that can't support a type 1 septic system. The ordinance sections that apply here are 1301.12 and 1501.4. You've received your full packet with the applicant's information and application, along with the staff report. I do have that available if you'd like to refer back to any of that. Here is an aerial photograph of the property. And then here is the photograph or the site drawing of the proposed parcel split upon which a house would be built. And then this is an excerpt from the application from the applicant with the house design. And then here are some photos taken at the site viewing. So some of the application and staff report highlights is that the applicant is proposing to purchase a 5-acre split from the current 150-acre parcel. So this is an intact parcel at the moment. If this variance is granted, then a 5-acre split would occur, and then that would be conveyed to the applicants, and then permitting of the home. The applicant's septic designer found a maximum of 10 inches of separation from the high water level. Again, 12 inches is needed for a type 1 or a standard septic system. There are pockets of wetland on this property, but not on this proposed split, and that was shown to you in your packet. And the applicant's contractor did submit a letter stating the site is suitable for a slab-on-grade dwelling, and a copy of that was also in your packet. So, Mr. Chair, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Miss Amy. How did that sound? Any changes, any adjustments, anything to add?
That looks pretty accurate.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open up to the board here for questions and discussion on this request.
Mr. Chair,
Arf.
I believe I was the only one that did not attend the viewing on this one, and I zoomed in on it quite with Beacon, and you could see things quite clearly on that. And when we get to that point, I've got a few questions, but I just wanted to point that out. I was the only one that did. I had a few things going that day.
Thank you, Marvin. We're on the property. Matt, myself, Clint, Brent, and George were all there on the 14th for viewing, as well as the other agenda item tonight. So, thank you, Marv. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair.
Clint?
Okay, Cullen, how, I'm sure you don't have the survey done yet, right? Kind of waiting to see.
Correct, yeah.
But if this would pass, then you're gonna do a survey and make that 5 acres come out, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then it said in here, you did, 8 to 9, 10 borings to try and find a spot. Can you guess how big an area that was? Because you went outside the 5 acres even and checked on that, right?
Correct. There was actually 13 documented
Okay.
boring sites that were tested. I do have a map that WATAB gave, if you'd like to see that.
Sure, you could bring that,
Yeah.
or Mr. Chair.
I'll need that for the record. I'll need to be able to keep it.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, bring it up here, please. Thank you.
Can I mark that as Exhibit 1, please?
Yes, you may.
So entering into exhibit, this is the septic, actually, there was 2 septic designs, I believe. Did you hand us separate, something different than this?
No,
Tom?
no.
You had 2 copies?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so this is from WATAB, and this is the septic evaluation.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Brent?
maybe a question for Amy. I know that as we look at some of these properties south of Hillman area, we run into that topsoil not being present. Is this, I noticed in this area as I drove through there, that there's a lot of mound systems in the area. Is this also another area of the county, or is this newly identified by the soil borers in that area?
Mr. Chair,
Amy?
within this area, we have a couple things, soils, and then we also have perched water tables. So, and that's going to vary, but when we get into the, especially the eastern half of the county, we see either a perched water table or heavy soils are more common over in that area. So one of the two we run into more on that side of the county. So yes, it's common. Mound systems are common, but they can be type 1 systems. Does that answer your
Right.
question?
Yeah, no, this is, for that topsoil here, it's 10 inches. We don't have the 12, 13 inches, so we got to go type 3.
That's correct.
If this is approved, but I'm just curious if that's common in this particular township or area as it is prevalent south of Hillman.
I would say a perched water table is more prevalent because we have the granite shelf there. So I would say a perched water table is more common than heavy soils in this area. But yes, so we'll see a type 3 for those 2 reasons. But in this area, it's more the granite shelf. That's the issue.
Okay, thank you.
George or Marv?
Mr. Chair,
Marv?
Amy, could you bring up Beacon and zoom in that area, and so I can see it, or we can all see it very, very clearly, because I could see the driveway and all like that, and I couldn't see the stakes because it was Beacon.
Okay, do you want Beacon or do you want the aerial photo from this?
Well, Beacon seemed to show it quite clearly, unless yours will do better.
Nope, I'll just get out of this and go to Beacon one moment. Where is it? There we go. Is the original parcel 000? Okay, what would you like me to zoom in on?
Zoom in, and I think there's like a field road, and you can see that kind of clearly, and I believe on his application, you were proposing it just at the end of that field road, kind of to the left as you're coming in there, and, you know, you seem to have some low spots in there, and, yeah.
I'm just gonna get some oblique imagery that's a little clearer.
There you go.
It's just taking a minute to load here, so. Okay, so here's the property.
Okay, and there was like a field road, okay, I see that field road there. And from the roadway coming out there. Okay.
That's it right there.
Yep, and then, once you get past them two fields, your planning is just on that area there to, would you put the pod exactly where the placement is?
Is that the location of the home? Can you see my,
Yes, if you take your mouse and drag it up, it would be my left.
You can just go up there and point on the TV.
Yep.
We all see.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought on there. And there's no area where you need wetland delineation. It looks like that road's been used quite a few times already.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the only question I had, and I didn't read anything from Soil and Water have any objection with this here. So, okay, not a problem. Thank you very much.
do you need Beacon anymore?
I don't think so.
Mr. Chair,
Brent?
just for the benefit of Marv, when we were out there on Friday in that area where he's proposing to build his house, there was a old farmstead that was in that exact same spot with a barn-type structure at one time in the past. So
Okay.
you can see a little bit of the debris of the foundation still there from the old homestead. I
in there.
think maybe a relative of the family? No. At one time, no.
The homestead was right up in here.
Okay,
That,
okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Marv. Anybody else? Okay, we'll open this section of the meeting up to the Public, anybody wishing to speak to this request, please go up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and state your facts as well, or ask your questions. Any public comment? Any public comment? Any public comment? We are now going to close this portion of the meeting to the public, and we will come back to the board here to discuss the finding of the fact criteria around this application. And any questions before we get started? Any conditions? Any? None. Okay. Question 1. Is the request in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan? Marv?
I believe it is. It was an old farmstead at one time, and here we, as Brent pointed out and are asked, when you get out this area, you have a considerable amount of property that you don't have the soil distance, what you need, 12 inches, and they did numerous, 16 borings, and none of them showed adequate. Their contractor came out there, said it's an adequate place to build, but there's no adequate place to put a type 1 system. And as we see mound systems all over, and this is just asking for permission with that, so they're going through the proper channels, so I believe it follows the comp plan.
Thank you, Marv. Anybody else? Question 2, is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by land use ordinance? Brent?
Yeah, I think he is. It's, a split to 5 acres. The plan is to build a home. I think it's reasonable to believe that if we have a home, we're going to have a sewer system. And in this particular area, a type 1 doesn't work, but a type 3 would be an alternative to that. It's a reasonable request proceeding forward, and the separations will occur above the ground in the type 3 system. So it should be a reasonable request.
Thank you, Brent. Anybody else? Question 3, will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? George?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I believe so. It's mostly all ag land, it's pasture, forest. There are some sparse residences to the south and along 253rd Street. In this area, it's a 5-acre parcel. It's an old building site. A new house will maintain the character of the locality. The only reason he's asking for a variance here is because he needs a type 3 septic system because the soil will not support a type 1.
Thank you, George. Anybody else? Okay. Question 4, is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? Clint?
Yes. When we look at this, it's 5 acres. The applicant's done really good due diligence to try and find a spot that's suitable to put a type 1 septic system on. 13 borings or whatever it was, and when we were out there on our site visit, we could see that spanned it out probably over 10 acres instead of just the 5, and it isn't obtainable. When you look at this particular piece of property, it's got tons of elevation to it. It's sandier ground. Heck, there's oak trees growing there. There's an old building site there. With doing all the due diligence and trying to find a spot to put the type 1 and can't do that, I think that's kind of the practical difficulty here. If we're gonna ever allow anything to be built, it's a perfect piece because it ain't gonna hurt any ag land. It's out in the pasture, so it's gonna take out 5 acres of a pasture. It's not gonna hurt the ag fields or anything like that. It just, that area with the whatever causing the 8 inches instead of the 12 or 13 that we need, kind of comes up with the practical difficulty to, if we wouldn't allow that, I think there would be no building area out there, and it's kind of a shame because it's a really good building location that's got tons of elevation to it.
Thank you, Clint. Anybody else? Question 5, is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners? That one comes to me. And just to sum up what was said 3 times here, I mean, you got 13 bore samplings at various locations there and at, well, actually you have a a couple of different, all 13 different elevations too, so that speaks for itself. It's just nothing else that will be supported. Anybody else? Question 6, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Marv?
I believe it does. I mean, they considered about not being able to split up the property and sell it and maybe gain some economics. A type 3 system is going to be more costly than a type 1. And as it was a previous building site, it fits in there, so it's much more than economic. And then when they went through the WATAP, I believe that's the township there, I believe WATAP, they were fine with it and stated that type 1 will not work, but a type 3, they're okay with it, so.
Thank you, Marv. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair?
Amy?
I just want to clarify for the record, WATAB is the septic designer. It is not the township.
Okay.
So I just wanted to go on record that the township did not provide any comment on this request.
Okay.
Thank you.
My fault.
All good.
But
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add one little thing here to it. Also, you know, building a house on this parcel would promote the wise utilization of that piece of land while protecting the open tillable land on the rest of the parcel.
Thank you, George. Any remaining questions, comments, concerns? Okay, we're going to go to the vote. Question 1, is the request in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan? Marv?
yes,
Brent?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
John is yes. Question 2, is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by land use ordinance? Brent?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
John is yes. Marv?
yes,
Question 3, will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? George?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
John is yes. Marv?
yes,
Brent?
Yes.
Question 4, is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? Clint?
Yes.
John is yes. Marv?
yes,
Brent?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Question 5, is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners? John is yes. Marv?
yes,
Brent?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Question 6, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Marv?
yes,
Brent?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
John is yes. All of the questions have been answered into the affirmative. Do I have a motion to approve this variance as requested?
Mr. Chair, I'd make the motion to approve it.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to second that.
Motion was made by Brent and seconded by Marv to approve the variance as requested. All in favor, say aye. Brent?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Brent? Or Marv?
Aye,
Clint?
Aye.
And John, is an aye. Your variance is requested. If you have any follow-up questions, please see Amy.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you. Agenda item 2 on the docket tonight, Kevin and Felicia Bush, 3945 320th Street, Cushing, Minnesota 56443. Please come up to the front and state your name for the record.
Hello, everybody. Hello. Good to see you again. Evening. I'm Kevin Bush. My
Thank
wife is sick of this whole thing, so she didn't want to come.
Okay, Amy, do we have a staff report ready?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Perfect.
Okay, this is a request to construct a dwelling within the bluff impact zone. The ordinance sections that apply to this is section 706.0 706.1 and 706.1E. Here's an aerial photograph of the property outlined in blue. And then here is the survey that was submitted with the variance application. Again, I'll say you have a full packet. I don't have the full packet here. I can display anything that you'd like, but it's not a part of my staff report. Then here are some design drawings provided by the applicant. And then here is the survey of the property with a few notable things highlighted. Here are some site photographs taken at the viewing. Some of the application and staff report highlights. This request is to encroach 15 feet into the setback from the bluff. Previous requests have been to be closer within the bluff. The last one was to be 6 feet from the bluff. 3 similar requests have been denied on this property, and that information was provided in your packet. There is a 40,000 plus square foot building envelope available on this property. 4 comments have been received, and I'll read them now. Okay, the first one is from Anthony and Roxanne Fernandez. It says, "We are sending this email per notice instruction in support of the variance to construct a dwelling within the bluff impact zone submitted by Kevin and Felicia Bush. We are their next door neighbors and have known them for many years. They are very considerate, responsible neighbors. Years ago, we listened as they discussed plans for their perfect retirement home and walked the lot with them so they could show us exactly what their intentions were. We were pleased when the permit to build was granted a few years ago. When that permit was rescinded, many lake owners, including ourselves, expressed concerns over the county's processes. We are again pleased to see Kevin and Felicia apply for a variance and want to offer our full support of their plans. This has been a long, drawn-out process for them, one that has cost them time and money. At our age, time is probably our most valuable asset. We hopefully look forward to celebrating their retirement in this long-planned home on our beautiful lake." The second comment is from Michael and Pamela Faust. Let's see. I received a letter stating that Kevin and Felicia Bush would like a variance regarding building a dwelling. Construction of any building should follow the current guidelines the county has in place now. Their property is large enough that a 40-foot setback or greater from the lake bluff should not impact or limit construction. The next comment is from Shannon Wetstein, the director of the Soil and Water Conservation District. This is the 4th time I have commented in opposition to this project: November 2019, June 2020, May 2023, and March 2025. Each request has remained the same from the landowner to build within the bluff setback on Lake Alexander. The first public hearing, I submitted a written comment that there is room on the property for the house to meet the setbacks. I spoke at the second hearing, commenting on the soils in this area, that they are Monaga loamy sand, that when they are disturbed, they are very unstable. I also pointed out that my role as the district manager at the Morrison County Soil and Water Conservation District is to administer the county water plan. That is why I will occasionally speak at hearings such as this. I made this point because the Bushes had publicly claimed that I could not possibly give a professional opinion, as I am not qualified to comment on the site suitability for their passive house building, especially without being out on site. I also spoke at the third hearing from a more practical, common sense point of view after visiting the property, since my previous comments were criticized by the landowner. I commented on the steep nature of the side hill and the proximity of the proposed house, the large nature of the lot, and how allowing a new building at this location would then create a non-conforming lot, which is what the county ordinance is trying to gradually eliminate. In conclusion, at all 3 hearings, my comment has remained the same. There is no hardship. This application and their previous applications, which were denied, were based on personal need. My stance has not changed on this 4th request. And the last comment is from Mark Anderson, from Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, the area hydrologist. This letter is regarding the most recent application submitted by Kevin and Felicia Bush to construct a dwelling within a bluff impact zone on Lake Alexander at the above described address. As this is now the fourth variance application that has been submitted for this property and project, and the record shows there have been 3 previous denials by the Morrison County Board of Adjustment in 2019, 2020, and 2023, my comments are going to be limited. As you are all aware, the most recent Morrison County Board of Adjustment denial in 2023 was upheld through the appeals process in District Court, 7th Judicial District. The crux of this application and those preceding is best summed up in the following court excerpt filing dated March 8th, 2024. And so this is a quote. The board denied the variance due to, among other reasons, determining that the alleged plight of the applicants was owner-created and thus no practical difficulty exists with this variance request. Appellants came to the hearing before the board with multiple suitable alternative locations on the property on which would not require a variance to build. After considering the evidence presented to them, the board found that the property was unique since there was such a large area of available space upon which to build. Following the same line of reasoning they did in ruling on the proposed use, the board determined that there was not a practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property, but rather one created by the owners. The record supports the board's decision that the hardship was not due to the unique circumstances of the property, but rather was owner-created by both not complying with the statute and having considered and proposed alternative options for the location of the cabin. The record contains ample evidence supporting the board's ruling on this matter, therefore the county is entitled to summary judgment. While this variance application has some minor modifications from previous iterations, the fact remains, as described above, a large area of available space upon which to build without a variance still exists on the property, and a practical difficulty has not been found on numerous occasions in different jurisdictions because of this. The applicant has failed to show a practical difficulty at every turn, and this has been affirmed by the 7th District Court. The Minnesota DNR supports the Morrison County Board of Adjustment past decisions of denial, the court's affirmation of the county process, and the continual application of the practical difficulty statute by the Morrison County Board of Adjustment, which should lead to a 4th denial. So those are the 4 comments, Mr. Chair. And then the other highlight that I have that's also within your packet is that there is a pending land use permit application for a dwelling that meets all setbacks on this property. It's incomplete at this time because we're waiting on a septic system design. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair. Oh, and then, sorry, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to put this in, and that is the drawing from the, or the site drawing associated with the land use permit that's pending. And that is also in your packet. Okay, I'm done, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anything to add, questions, or adjust Mr. Bush from not the people's comments, but the information that was provided?
Could you say it again, please?
The information that was provided, not the people's comments, do you have anything to adjust, edit, revise?
No.
Okay, I'm going to open this up for the board. Questions on the application?
Mr. Chair,
Marv?
I was only one that,
Stop, 1 second.
Did you want me to make my presentation at that point?
I opened up to the board. I asked if you had anything to add or say. Do you have anything to add or say?
Well, I didn't understand that. If you want me to correct what she was saying or talk about what she said.
Or add a comment? Yes, that's what I asked.
Yeah, I do have comments.
Okay, you can have comments. We'll come back and I'll open this back up to the board. Hold your thought right there.
I
Marv, please hold your thought. Thank you. Go ahead.
All right. So it's going to be lengthy, and it's lengthy because,
I'll give you 10 minutes. All you have to do is address the things that were different from the previous 3 applications. That's what your 10 minutes is for.
what is the process again?
10 minutes. I'm the chair of this board, and you have 10 minutes to explain to the board, your information packet, what's different from the previous 3 rejections that you've submitted.
Will that be all the time that I have for a presentation this entire evening?
I think the board will have questions for you. So there will be more information gathered. We'll have public comment that'll be gathered as well.
I think that's totally unfair,
That's fine.
because I have more to present, and it's because there's so many,
We have to stick to the facts, Mr. Bush.
that's what I'm trying to do, but I have to have time to refute the facts, and you're not giving me time.
We have all the facts right here in this
Not enough.
application. All the facts right here that you said, this is what my application is. Here's the facts associated with my application. You answer the questions in here on the application about what we need to consider with our 6 questions as we review this. It's the same process for everybody. You've been through this 3 other times. What's different?
Okay, number one, this is the fact and this is the truth. All right, the bluff and the bluff impact zone on my property will not be impacted by my construction. That's the truth. And the only thing you need to read to understand that is the engineer's statement that he made. Eric Meyer, the civil engineer, is the only qualified person in this state to make that decision. Nobody else is. Nobody else is licensed by the state to make that kind of determination. Shannon Wetstein is not that person. Mark Anderson is not that person. There's nobody in the county that's qualified to make that decision. Now, if you have a civil engineer that wants to make it, that's fine. But nobody's brought that up. And so the only truth you can find out is that that bluff will not be impacted by my construction. And if that bluff is not impacted by my construction, why are you deciding to take that land away from me? That's my question. Because that's the most valuable land that I have. And you're taking it away from me without any good reason. Every single one of you, if you vote no on this variant, you're taking that land from me. And that's just wrong. It's immoral. You don't have a good reason to do that. And I tried to bring this forth, and what happens is I get half-truths, I get misstatements, I get distortions, I get all kinds of incorrect statements. I'm trying to refute those. Just like the idea of there's 40,000 square feet. And I asked you out at the site, I was gonna ask this question about, do you think you could build your cabin next to the road? Nobody wanted to answer that question because you know that you wouldn't. But when you say it's 40,000 square feet, what you're implying is that part of the property is just as good as the other part of the property. That's what you're implying. And that's a lie of deception. It's pure and simple. Now, when I try to move my cabin off of the bluff impact zone, I can move it to the west, and then I'm right next to my neighbor's cabin. And that's a non-conforming property because it's only 55 feet wide, and 2 of the structures are only 4 feet from the property line. And their activity spills out into my property. Well, nobody wants to go next to them because it just creates conflict. And the thing that makes me mad is I have a pretty good argument here, and you're not letting me make it.
Was it submitted in your packet?
I have more right here.
Well,
I didn't make all of it.
you got another 7 minutes.
Matt, is this the way you want to run your county?
It's not Matt's meeting, it's my meeting.
All right. So it's a practical difficulty to be next to my neighbor, because that's not fair to push my cabin over to there. And yes, I do have a building permit. I have a building permit to be there. And if you make me do that, the only thing that's gained from you is power, because you're not gaining anything by moving me off the bluff impact zone. It's ridiculous. And that cabin is just as close to the steep slope of the lake as a cabin in the bluff impact zone. And so how it impacts the lake any differently, it boggles my mind to think there's a difference. Now, the other practical difficulty is that driveway, because I share that driveway with my neighbor. And I made this point out on the site that I can go out there and I can start building, if I had a permit, I could go build a cabin on top of that driveway. And what do you think my neighbor is going to do at that point? He's going to sue me. I'm going to pass this out. Here's a letter that I got.
When you're going to ask, hold on a second. With this meeting, you got to ask for permission to do stuff. We're going to ask to talk, and we're going to follow it the way you said. We're going to follow the process.
Okay.
What exhibit is this?
That'd be Exhibit 1, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, can I have permission to pass this out?
Keep going.
All right. So here's what I got from my neighbor. However, we must inform you that we will take legal action if the easement is impacted. He's talking about the driveway. I do not feel it necessary to have my attorney send you a formal letter and incur the cost. I thought it best to notify you this concern and only take action if needed. So that's a practical difficulty. I can't put my cabin on top of our shared driveway. And the other thing about that shared driveway, that's better for the county, because the county wants to limit impervious surface. If the neighbor was made to make his own driveway, now you get 2 driveways instead of 1. Why would the county do that to itself? That's what I want to know. The third practical difficulty is the lack of access to, direct access to the sun. And the county, in the last variance denial, pointed out that I can't, I can't have direct access to the sun without a variance. And the law says that lack of access, direct access to the sun, is a practical difficulty. That's the only thing on the list. Now, why would they do that? Why would the county have that in the variance? They would have it in there because they want people to do solar, because that's good for the environment. It's a plus. And somebody said in there that it's a personal decision. Well, how else would you decide to do solar? You don't have to do it. It's not like a roof on a house, where if you don't have a roof, you're going to be in trouble. A solar always is a personal decision to do, every single time. And so, if I have a lack of direct access, as the county stated at the last meeting, in that variance denial, that's a practical difficulties. I count at least 3 practical difficulties. And every time I come up here, you deny that I have them. Why? Because the ultimate goal is to not let me have the variance. And so that's what happens here. There's a bunch of denial. You don't accept my information. This is long because there's so much to unpack. It's terrible what's happening here. And I'm saying that what happens is the comments that are received, like you just heard from Mark Anderson and Shannon Wetstein, they're based on half-truths, they're based on false narratives, they're based on lies. And if this county continues to operate that way, that's not a very healthy government.
Anything else?
Well, I'm sure my time is almost up.
Go ahead.
I got like 30 pages of material. Am I supposed to wade through there? And
Well, do you have things in there that are different on this application that are different?
I want to go, where's my slide deck?
I can pull it up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, John, I think this is very unfair. Sorry. I want to go to the last few slides, the last couple slides. First of all, reasonableness. This is from the Minnesota League of Cities. The first factor is that the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner. This factor means that the landowner will like to use the property in a particularly reasonable way, but cannot do so under the rules of the ordinance. It does not mean that the land cannot be put to use in another reasonable way without the variance. For example, if the application for a building is too close to the lot line, or does not meet the required setback, the focus of the first factor is whether the request to place the building there is reasonable. So when you say 40,000 square feet, or you have all this area, this statement right here basically blows that apart. Because you can't expect, you don't have the homeowner does not have to prove other options, does not have to build it any other place. The only question is putting my cabin back where the old cabin was, is that a reasonable thing to do? Of course it is. In the very first variance that we tried to get, the Board of Adjustment voted that, yes, it was reasonable. And then some people decided that I shouldn't get the variance, and the next 2 times it was voted that it wasn't reasonable. Let's go to the second one. Uniqueness. I want to stay at the bottom right there. What can be considered unique? Sloping topography, like a bluff on your property, or other natural features like wetlands or trees. trees, according to this, is uniqueness. I don't know what else you would have. I mean, if trees are trees, if this says that trees can be a unique thing, then that can be a practical difficulty, uniqueness. But the other unique features are my neighbor's non-conforming property, the road, the shared road, and also the lack of direct sun. Now, I have one more thing to show you. I might approach everybody and show you something else from my solar consultant.
Please do.
All right. I don't have copies for everybody. The first one,
Just right here.
it talks about, I asked the solar designer to show me how I would put solar panels on my roof. I have to keep one, sorry, can you guys share? So the first one is an email, and it describes where I can put where the cabin should go that has the rooftop solar panels. And he says in here, we're looking, in the middle of this paper, we're looking to get at least 60% annual access to the sun to be considered a good location to put solar panels. The middle of the site with the clearing would meet this requirement. As you move towards the west, the neighbor's trees affect the solar production more, and it does not appear to meet the 60% annual access to the sun that is required to be feasible for solar. The second one shows that I can offset my electrical usage by 94% with the solar panels on one of the roofs of my cabin, but it's only if it's in the center of the lot, which is where I show it on the proposed plan. They say that there's no other place to put it. And so because of, and one thing about the bluff and the bluff impact zone, and Haney said it the last time I was here, that you're forbidden to take trees down off the bluff or bluff impact zone. And so when that comes out 2/3 of your property, everything north of there, basically, you don't get sun and you can't cut the trees down. So that's a practical difficulty. There's 3 practical difficulties here. Past boards have denied that I have any practical difficulties. It's ridiculous, to be honest. Can I make a concluding statement, please?
Please.
All right. By not granting our variance application, the land that is best suited for the cabin construction of my property has been stolen from me by Morrison County. They did this by not acknowledging that the bluff and bluff impact zone are stable and not erode or be compromised during construction, despite testimony to the contrary by certified and licensed people. They did it without acknowledging what the consequences would be for the property owner or even to the county's own interests. They did it by putting into the record misleading information and generalizations such as the bluff is fragile, the size of the property is unique, the land is really steep, and your kids are at risk. Solar doesn't work on this property, your forest is unhealthy. The future would bring heavier rainstorms, etc. Refuse to acknowledge the owner's desperate cry for relief. What else? Why else would you go through a variance application 3 times and then an appeal? Refuse to sympathize with the neighboring property owner who would get a new cabin 15 feet away from theirs or lose their driveway access to their property. Refuse to acknowledge that the county itself wants homeowners to build solar energy systems. Refuse to acknowledge that cutting down slews of trees goes against the county's own comprehensive plan or the DNR or the Shore and Water Conservation District organizational mission statements. Refuse to acknowledge that putting the cabin in a good location on our property provides a better solution for our property and the neighboring property. Refuse to acknowledge that putting the cabin in a bad location compromises the property for the next 100 years. This is what happens when government officials and officials from local agencies start to believe that they are not servants of the people, that feel like they are above the law. What's most disturbing is that there are people in Morrison County that will use their power to force a property owner into making bad decisions regarding their property, and these people have no empathy with the property owners. I have explained the duty required by the comprehensive plan to treat each property as unique property. I have shown you the science of engineering, and the case studies indicate the bluff and the property will not be impacted during construction. I have explained our practical difficulties, and I've shown you how our proposed plan meets the county's comprehensive plan better than any other option. I believe that what we're requesting is reasonable and we should be granted a variance for our property. By not granting the variance, the board is turning their backs on the truth and joining with the other people that have used half-truths, false narratives, and lies of deception to mislead others to making bad decisions. This is a terrible way for county government to operate.
Thank you, sir. Marv?
Mr. Chair, all I was going to do is point out, I was the only one that didn't attend last Friday's viewing. I was part of the beginning of this here, so I visited this site 3 times already, and Mr. Bush showed it quite clearly before. Beautiful, beautiful lot, but I just wanted to point out, I wasn't there, and I had things going that day, but being I seen it that many times, I thought I had no need to be there.
Thanks, Marv. We are open for questions, comments.
Mr. Chair,
Clint?
Mr. Bush, do you have a legally binding driveway easement on file at the county or anywhere?
No. And why would you go through the expense of that?
Just a question.
I know, but the implication to that question is that if I don't have one, then I shouldn't, then you can't count it as a practical difficulty. That's the implication. That's not true.
That wasn't where I was going with it, but whatever. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
George?
So I'll expand on the driveway a little bit. So the Roush's own two lots next to you, right? So the second lot over does have a driveway, and both lots are in their name, so why can't the Roush's use that driveway instead of using your driveway?
Well, their current driveway is on the far west side, on the west property is on their far west part of the property. They'd have to cross over their entire property to get to the other cabin. And I also want to say that I know that their cabins are not in the same name. They're in 2 separate owners, of the same family, but separate owners. And the reason they did that is they don't know if they're going to hang on to both those properties all the time. At some point, they might decide to sell one, and to handicap them right now, I mean, that would just be a bad thing to do.
Well, I guess to me, it just seems like, if they have access to the property, they should use the access across their own property. I guess that's just my personal feeling on it, that, to me, they'd be trespassing, in my opinion.
Well, the situation that's there now has been there 100 years on my property. We both accept it, and it's the best solution, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, George.
Mr. Chair,
Marv?
so Amy, on figure 1, can you bring that up and we can use comparisons, what the tree lines look from previous till now?
Yep, Mr. Chair, just give me one moment to pull that up. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, if you, the first one to the left, what year has that been taken?
Give me just a second, Mr. Chair, to get that.
No problem.
2023 and 2017.
Okay,
Mr.
so,
Chair, the photo on the left is from the 2023 aerial flight, and the one on the right is from the 2017.
okay, so my question is, pointing out this here, seeing this here, if you look at the latest one, 23, you have a considerable opening down towards the lake, whereas there was trees that looked like they were cut out of there in that area. Can you, and you concerned about trees, can you explain what happened there?
The only, right down by the lake, I lost 4 trees one year, around 2017 to wind, and they blew into the lake. There was one big pine tree that was just a lovely tree that died, and that was cut down about 3 years ago.
And I'm no forester. Like I said, I believe you got a beautiful piece of property. I love driving in there, but it scared me. I would not want to drive in your property when it's windy, as many dead trees there are. And it is your personal choice. It is your property. You can do what you want. But I think about California and the wildfires, and you read why it was created. It's all these dead trees If a fire got started, it would be a issue there, and it's personal choice. And that's why I'm looking at here, you have, you don't want to cut any trees, but there's something about management of trees too, in my opinion.
Thank you, Marv.
Mr. Chairman,
George.
I have another question. I'll start with Amy. So Amy, Mr. Bush, there was a cabin on the property when he bought the property. Did he have the right to rebuild that as it was?
Mr. Chair? Yes. Yes, he had the right to replace what he had. Same size, same location.
So do we know where that cabin was located on the property?
Yes, if you look on this picture to the right, you'll see it right there.
So was that cabin in the bluff impact zone?
It was in the bluff,
It was in the bluff.
if I recall.
Was portion of it outside the bluff impact zone?
I'd have to look. I'd have to refer to the original survey, and that is in your packet, of the original cabin and where that sat in there. But it did not meet setback from the bluff or the bluff impact zone.
Well, I guess where I was going with this would be to the fact that if that cabin had been there and part of it had been outside of the bluff impact zone and he had rebuilt it, then a person could come to this board and ask for a variance to add on. And this board has been somewhat sympathetic to people adding on to cabins that were outside of a lake impact zone or a bluff impact zone. We've been semi lenient on that.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Amy.
I'm not going to debate the voting record of the Board of Adjustment because that's not what he asked for, and I wouldn't ever hypothesize how you would view a request like that because they're all looked at on their own merits.
I have a question.
And, Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Coulda, woulda, shoulda stuff? Let's not discuss that.
Okay,
we're not
let's
going.
just go on there.
You were going to say about the bluff, was it?
May I answer his question regarding the cabin?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, so if Amy goes to slide 2 in the slide deck, that's the survey.
Mr.
And-
Chair,
Go ahead.
in whose slide deck, yours or
Mine.
mine?
So the existing cabin was partially in the bluff impact zone and partially outside the bluff impact zone, but it doesn't show up that way because this was the original survey right
Oops.
here.
Sorry,
Go
excuse
back.
me.
The original survey did not have the side impact zone. You can see it, it's not there.
Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to get this zoomed. I got so much stuff open here. I'm just going to leave it be.
Okay, so that shows the existing cabin. It was not, you see there's no side setback there? It's because during our entire first variance hearing, this was the survey we used. And I was actually the proposed cabin was actually in the bluff impact zone as it's shown here. When I went up to get my building permit to move the cabin on the side of the bluff, I was denied my permit in March 2020. And so, because the county added a 30-foot setback without telling us that they did that, and then Amy blamed me for that because I wasn't working with her for those 3 months. But the reason I didn't want to build there, because that cabin was 100 years old. How do you add on to a 100-year-old cabin that doesn't have a legal foundation? And it's 100 years old. You don't do that. Plus, it's 936 square feet. And if you want to build 2,000 square feet, you've got to build on the same footprint, but you don't build 936 square feet if you want to build 2,000 square feet. There's another property down at 5223 320th Street that built in the same footprint. And they're actually right in the slope to the lake. Have you seen that? Did you go by there? Did you stop in and see that?
No, when we took this application under consideration, we focus on your property and your property alone. That's how we view these.
I had that in my presentation to show, that's why I brought it up. And there was nothing wrong with doing that, apparently.
Board members, anything else? Questions? Okay, hearing none, we're going to open up to public comment. Anybody in the audience wishing to speak to this request, please go to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and your facts. Any public comment? Any public comment? Any public comment? We will close this portion of the meeting to the public, and we will move to the finding of fact criteria. Board members, any questions before we move here? Question 1, is the request in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan? Brent.
I'm conflicted on this. In one regard, I think it is. In another regard, I think it isn't. Mr. Bush is proposing to build a structure there. And if he feels that the county's ordinances and comprehensive plans are too restrictive, he has a right to bring it to this board for us to hear it. And that's just exactly what he's done. And in that regard, that is in harmony with the county policies and ordinances, and he's applying for that. I'm conflicted on this one, as what he wants to do is build his house and encroach in that bluff setback. Well, this time is different than last, that the house has been reduced in size, correct?
Correct.
And he's moved it inward and over to the neighbors. But he also has a permit in place to build a conforming structure. And so I'm conflicted when you have a process in place and you have a permit that's pending for a conforming structure. It's kind of not in harmony in that regard when you propose to ask for a variance to build a non-conforming. So I think this is kind of a double-edged sword on this one. For me, it is.
I think when people are going to request variance like this, especially on your property with what you did with the house, what you had the right to rebuild and what you had the right to put up initially, I think you did what anybody would have done, and this is where my stance was on the first part on your application that I reviewed last time. I wasn't part of the first two, but I stay my stance. I think it is in harmony with the general purposes and intent of this land use and the overall comprehensive plan.
Mr. Chair?
Clint?
I'd just like to add that, just take a note that Mr. Bush, in his answer on question 1, he did it very thoughtfully. He did a 4-page answer. And when I read through all that, I can agree a lot with him on the comprehensive side of that, that bluff isn't tied in with the comprehensive plan. But when we look at the ordinance side of this, that's where I'd have to disagree. So that's why I would probably say no to question 1.
Thank you, Clint. Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman.
George?
So I got a couple things here. I guess where I'm conflicted with this thing, and I spent a lot of time on this. I've probably got 25 hours into evaluating this thing, and I can ask my wife. It's what drove me over the edge. But anyway, one of the problems I have is approving this variance is that anything that is ever done on that cabin going forward, whether Mr. Bush does it or whether his neighbor or a new owner does it, they're going to have to get a variance. And that to me is problematic.
Why?
So, no. We don't consider future requests based on this application for the request at this moment in time. That's not how we think about those. It's not a harmony request for what could be done, it's a harmony request for this.
Yes,
Yep,
thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Amy,
I'm not sure if you're going to move on to question number 2,
we're going.
but what I've heard is just you reiterate whether or not it is or isn't in harmony. I need a little bit more explanation of why it is or is not in harmony for the record, please?
From,
From either one, anybody. So I need more than just, I believe this is in harmony, or that it is not. I need to know why.
I think all of the things that he's looking at, not just from the neighbor perspective, we're not considering the neighbor's property, we're considering what the actual plan says about being a good neighbor. I believe him in that. And what he could have built initially on the bluff, and he's decided to move that outside, although the house was there before the bluff was there, and the house was there before the bluff impact zone was there, and he moved that over. I think he's doing the county a favor by doing it that way.
So, Mr. Chair, the question is the request in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan? Can you please talk about what the general purpose and intent of the particular section he's asking for a variance is from, and how it is or is not in harmony, please?
Say that again?
So Mr. Bush is asking for a variance to encroach on the setback from the bluff. What is the purpose of that? What is the purpose of that setback, and how is his request in or not in harmony with that? That's what I'm asking for here. That's what I need, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Can you assist? Am I asking that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, the consideration would be both in the element, or the portion of the ordinance that he's seeking a variance from, but also in the broader ordinance and comprehensive plan, goals and purposes.
Aren't those listed in the staff report?
I have given you the ordinance section that applies. I've given you the DNR sonar, and I have given you the sections of the comprehensive.
No, I understand that, but the plan came after the house was there. He had the ability to build the house, so when you asked me if the request is in harmony with the general purposes, he could have built the house right there. And I understand we're not doing coulda, woulda, shouldas, but where he put his house now, as far as being in harmony and understanding what's being protected and not protected, yeah, I think he's within his ask.
Okay, so I have a reason on the record for a yes. I'm hearing some rationale for a no. I need more, please.
Mr. Chair? Can
Marv?
I don't believe it is, and the reason why is this is a bluff zone area, bluff impact. Now, in Morrison County Comp Plan, that is a very protected area, very sensitive, and it's not that something would be happening in the next few years, but highly erodible soil, beautiful lake, Lake Alec there. And I fished it, I've been on it hundreds of
Let's
times.
stick to the application,
Okay,
not
but
the
anyhow,
not the lake. Yeah.
I'm saying that this property, allowing this here, building in a bluff impact zone is not in harmony because he already had a plan that he could be using with alternative place to put this. He already submitted one, but he didn't fully submit it. There is other alternatives. When you do this, if he has no other alternative, and then we'll look at this here. And that's the way I see it.
Thank you, Marv.
Mr. Chair.
Clint?
I'll just add to the reason why I said no was, there's setbacks, from the lake, from the bluff, from the property lines. He can meet most of them, but he can't meet the setback from the bluff impact zone. So that's why I said it was not in harmony.
Thank you, Clint. Question 2, is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the land use ordinance? George?
Well, here's a statement I'll make. Mr. Bush is proposing to use this property in a reasonable manner by building a modest home on his parcel. I mean, a modest home would fit in there beautifully. However, having a 40,000 square foot lot or building envelope and building in a bluff impact zone is unreasonable in my opinion. There is plenty of room to reposition the cabin, change the roof lines to accommodate a passive solar array.
Thank you, George. Anybody else? Okay, question 3. Will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? Clint?
Mr. Chair. So when we look at this from a aesthetic standpoint, driving by the road, you're not even going to see it because it's a very wooded lot, so you won't even really know what's there. But when we go from the lake side, you look at all the cabins that are around that lake, having the lake frontage, being able to see them, I think the essential character is going to be there, definitely. Don't know what the rest of the essential character is, if there's other places that are in a bluff impact zone or not. I don't know that because I'm looking at this one. But from the essential character part, I do believe that, yes, it will maintain the character of this locality.
Anybody else? Question 4, is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? And that one comes to me. You can't have an application in that meets all the setbacks and then have an application asking for the variance, and it's not a personal preference. It doesn't work together. So the practical difficulty in this application, with everything considered, doesn't exist. Anybody else? Question 5, is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners? Marv?
No, and the way I view it is here, when we ask for a survey now before you can apply for a variance. So anyhow, after the survey was done, it was found that where they wanted to place this was in a bluff area. So with that being the case, yeah, they knew what they were dealing with, and it's back to personal preference versus a practical or need for this here. So I view it as a personal preference more than, and it's created by themselves.
Thank you, Marv. Question 6, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Brent?
Well, if I heard you correctly, John, indicating that there isn't a practical difficulty, it's difficult to answer number 6 regarding just economic considerations.
Understood. Thank you. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair.
Clint?
I would say there's probably more than just economics. Economics is a big part of it. He stated himself, the applicant did, about his solar. He's going to save a lot of money if he could build it where he wants on his solar for his energy. So that is a big part of it. I think majority of this answer would be that it's more personal preference than it is about the economics, is what I would probably answer for question 6.
Thank you, Clint. Anybody else? Okay, heading to the vote. Question 1, is the request in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan? Brent?
I'm going to say yes and revert back to my original answer, or my original comments to the board, is that he has the right, if he feels that the county and the county ordinance are too strict, to appeal it to this board, and that's exactly what he's done. And so in that regard, it's in harmony with general purposes intent of the land use ordinance by appealing it to this board.
Thank you, Brent. George?
Yes.
Clint?
No.
John? John is yes. Marv?
No.
Is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by land use ordinance? George?
No.
Clint?
No.
John is yes. Marv?
No.
Brent?
I say yes.
Question 3, will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? Clint?
Yes.
John is yes. Marv?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Question 4, is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? John is no. Marv?
No.
Brent?
No.
George?
No.
Clint?
No.
Question 5, is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners? Marv?
No.
Brent?
No.
George?
No.
Clint?
No.
John is no. Question 6, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Brent?
No.
George?
No.
Clint?
No.
John is no. Marv?
No.
We do not have all the questions answered to the affirmative. Do I have a request or a motion to deny the variance as requested?
Mr. Chair, I'd make that motion to,
Mr. Chairman, I'll second it.
Motion was made by Clint and seconded by George to deny the requested variance. All in favor, Brent?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Marv?
Aye.
Clint?
aye.
John is aye. The variance is denied at this time. Anything that you need to do moving ahead, please work with Amy and the county staff. Thank you for your time. Okay, agenda item number 3, new or old business. Or do you want to do minutes first?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
No, that's all right. I'm just going
trying
in
to get my
order.
slide back here. I've got approval of past meeting minutes next on the agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'd make a motion to approve the March 4th minutes.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Minutes approved.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Old business?
At this time, Mr. Chair, I do not have any old or new business.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, make a motion that we adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll second that.
Aye.
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 Aye. Meeting adjourned at 7:19 PM.